I knew something was wrong the moment her phone buzzed late at night. She turned it off quickly, her smile too casual, her excuses too rehearsed. That was the first crack in the perfect life we had built together, or so I thought. But I didn't confront her, not yet. Instead, I decided to watch, to wait, and to learn. That evening, we hosted a dinner for her colleagues, a group she had been raving about for weeks. She floated through the room with ease, her laughter echoing like a melody I no longer recognized. My eyes kept drifting to one man, Mark. He lingered near her more than anyone else, their conversations punctuated by smiles that felt too familiar. When I caught her gaze across the room, her smile faltered for just a second. It was quick, almost imperceptible, but enough to confirm my suspicion. I played my role, raising a toast to her career and charming her friends. Every word out of my mouth was calculated, a performance to mask the storm building inside me. After the guests left, I casually asked, "You and Mark seem close." Her response was instant, almost too perfect. "He's just a colleague," she said, turning away before I could see her face. Later that night, as she slept soundly beside me, I opened her laptop. I wasn't expecting to find anything right away, but there it was, a hotel receipt from the week before. The name on the booking stung like a dagger. Mark. I closed the laptop and lay back in bed, staring at the ceiling. She thought she was clever, thought she had me fooled. But that was her mistake. She didn't know I was already 2 steps ahead. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had changed. Over breakfast, I asked about her day, her plans, the mundane things that made our life feel normal. She smiled as she answered, completely unaware that I knew the truth. I spent the day putting my plan into motion. First, I hired a private investigator to gather more evidence. If she thought she could hide behind lies, I'd make sure her secrets came crashing down. The investigator was thorough, and within 48 hours, I had everything I needed: pictures, messages, and even video footage of their stolen moments together. But I wasn't just going to confront her. No, that would be too easy, too quick. She needed to feel the weight of her betrayal, to understand the depth of what she had destroyed. I started with small things, subtle moves designed to unsettle her. I began coming home later than usual, claiming work kept me busy. I watched her carefully as I mentioned late meetings or sudden trips. Her smile grew strained, her questions more frequent. She was trying to gauge whether I suspected anything, and I made sure to keep her guessing. The real test came when I suggested a weekend getaway. "Just the 2 of us," I said, feigning enthusiasm. Her hesitation was slight but unmistakable. "I'll have to check my schedule," she replied, her voice just a little too high-pitched. When she finally agreed, I knew it wasn't because she wanted to go, it was because she was trying to cover her tracks. What she didn't know was that I had already set everything up. This trip wasn't about us reconnecting. It was about setting the stage for her downfall. As the weekend getaway approached, I meticulously prepared every detail, making sure it would be a trip she'd never forget, but for all the wrong reasons. I booked us a cabin in the mountains, secluded enough to give her no escape when the time came. On the drive there, I kept the conversation light, asking about her work and her friends. She was relaxed, even cheerful, likely believing that I was completely oblivious. But every laugh, every stolen glance at her phone, only strengthened my resolve. She had no idea I was leading her straight into the trap I had set. The cabin was perfect, cozy, romantic, and isolated. As we unpacked, I watched her closely, noting the way she seemed distracted, her eyes flitting to her phone more often than usual. That night, as we sat by the fire, sipping wine, I decided to test her. "You've been working so hard lately," I said, my tone casual. "It must be exhausting keeping up with everything." She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. "It's been busy, but I manage." Her phone buzzed on the table, and she grabbed it quickly, holding it just out of my view. "Work?" I asked, tilting my head. She hesitated for a fraction of a second before nodding. "Yeah, just a quick update." I smiled, pretending to accept her answer, but inside my anger simmered. She was still lying, still underestimating me. That night, while she slept, I retrieved her phone. I had anticipated she would have it locked, but thanks to the investigator, I already knew her passcode. As I scrolled through her messages, the proof was undeniable. Explicit texts, plans for secret meetings, even a thread where she mocked me with her lover. My hands clenched the phone, but I forced myself to stay calm. This wasn't the time to confront her. Not yet. I carefully placed the phone back and returned to bed, my mind racing with the final piece of my plan. Morning came, and she woke to the smell of coffee and breakfast. I greeted her with a smile, hiding the storm brewing beneath the surface. "I thought we could go for a hike today," I suggested. "The views are supposed to be incredible." She agreed, and we set off, the crisp mountain air biting at our faces. As we climbed higher, I kept the conversation flowing, masking my true intentions. She laughed and chatted, completely unaware that this would be the last time she'd see me as the man she thought she could deceive. By the time we reached the peak, the view was breathtaking, a vast expanse of rolling mountains bathed in golden sunlight. She stood at the edge, taking it all in, and for a moment, I almost felt a pang of regret. Almost. I stepped closer, my voice calm. "It's beautiful, isn't it?" She nodded, turning to me with a smile. "I'm glad we did this. It's nice to get away from everything." I held her gaze for a moment longer than usual, searching for any sign of guilt or remorse. There was none. She truly believed she had me fooled. "You know," I began, my tone still light, "I've been thinking a lot about us lately, about how lucky I am to have you." Her eyes softened, and for a brief moment, I wondered if she felt anything real for me anymore. But then, her phone buzzed in her pocket, and her hand instinctively moved to silence it. That was all the confirmation I needed. I reached into my jacket and pulled out an envelope, holding it out to her. "Speaking of luck, I have something for you." She looked surprised, but took the envelope, opening it cautiously. Inside were printed screenshots of her messages with Mark, photos of their meetings, and the hotel receipts. Her face went pale, the color draining from her cheeks as she flipped through the evidence. What is this?" she stammered, her voice trembling. "I think you know exactly what it is," I said, my voice sharp now, the mask of calm slipping away. "Did you really think I wouldn't find out? That I'd never notice?" She stumbled over her words, trying to explain, to deny, but I cut her off. "Save it. I've heard enough lies to last a lifetime." I stepped closer, my voice lowering. "Do you have any idea what you've done? You didn't just betray me, you made me feel like a fool in my own home, but not anymore. You see, I've been one step ahead of you this whole time." Her hands shook as she clutched the envelope, tears welling in her eyes. "Please let me explain," she begged, but I wasn't interested in explanations. "This isn't a conversation," I said firmly. "It's a reckoning." I turned and began walking back down the trail, leaving her standing there, clutching the evidence of her betrayal. But I wasn't done yet. The revenge I had planned wasn't just about exposing her lies, it was about ensuring she'd feel the consequences for a long, long time. By the time we returned to the cabin, she was a wreck. Her hands trembled, and she couldn't stop glancing at me, searching for some sign of forgiveness. But I wasn't interested in forgiveness. Not now. I poured us both a glass of wine, handing hers over with an unreadable expression. She hesitated before taking it, her nerves on full display. "I need to explain," she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, swirling the wine in my glass. "Go ahead," I said coolly. "Explain how the person I loved most in this world decided I wasn't enough." Her voice cracked as she stumbled through her excuses. "It wasn't like that. I didn't mean for it to happen. It was a mistake, I swear." I slammed my glass down, cutting her off. "A mistake is forgetting an anniversary or burning dinner. What you did was deliberate. You lied to my face, snuck around, and then laughed about it behind my back. Her face crumpled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't want to lose you." I laughed, a cold, bitter sound. "You lost me the moment you betrayed me. But don't worry, I'm not here to fight. I'm here to make sure you understand exactly what you've done." She looked at me, confused and terrified. "What do you mean?" I stood and walked to the counter, picking up another envelope. "Do you know what this is?" I asked, holding it up. She shook her head, her lip trembling. "This," I said, tossing it onto the table, "is everything you've worked so hard to build. Your reputation, your career, your perfect little life, all laid bare. Copies of your messages, the hotel receipts, the photos. And guess what? Mark's wife has already seen it. She knows everything." Her eyes widened in horror, and she reached for the envelope, but I stopped her. "No, no. You don't get to control this narrative anymore. You thought you could humiliate me, turn me into a fool. But now it's your turn to face the consequences." Her breathing quickened, panic setting in. You wouldn't." I smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Oh, I already have. By the time we get back, everyone you know will have seen the truth. Your colleagues, your family, your friends, they'll all know who you really are." She collapsed into the chair, sobbing uncontrollably. For the first time, I felt a sliver of satisfaction. This wasn't just revenge, it was justice. But I wasn't done yet. There was one final twist she never saw coming. This is section 6, the final section of the story. I watched her crumble, the weight of everything crashing down on her. The woman who had once held all the power in our relationship, the one who thought she could deceive me without consequence, was now completely exposed. But even as she sat there, broken and sobbing, I didn't feel pity. I didn't feel remorse. She had shattered everything we had, and now it was time for her to face the full impact. I walked to the door, pulling on my jacket. "I'm leaving," I said calmly, my voice steady. "This is over. I'm done." She looked up, her face swollen from tears. "Please, don't go. Please, I love you." I shook my head. "Number you loved the idea of me, but not enough to respect me, to honor what we had. You chose him over me. That's not love." As I turned to leave, I paused. "And just so you know, Mark's wife already knows everything. You won't be able to hide from this, not for a second. Your lies have caught up to you, and now you'll pay the price." I stepped out into the cold night air, feeling the sting of the wind against my skin. It felt almost refreshing, like a weight had been lifted. As I walked away, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I knew exactly who it was. The investigator had been busy. Mark had already tried to reach me, probably to beg for some kind of forgiveness or to warn me off. But I wasn't interested in hearing anything from him. He had no place in my life anymore. I called my lawyer, and as we discussed the next steps, I felt an undeniable sense of clarity. She thought she could destroy me, but instead, she had unknowingly given me the final piece I needed to move forward. I wasn't just reclaiming my life, I was reclaiming my dignity, my strength. The car ride back to the city was silent, but in my mind, the narrative was already complete. I had gotten my revenge, but more than that, I had learned something about myself. I wasn't the fool she thought I was. I wasn't the weak man she'd tried to manipulate, and I would make sure she never forgot that.